To give you a little bit of background information, my name is Trevor Snyder, and I'm a project manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I am in charge of all of the rivers and channels within the Los Angeles County drainage area. Before that, and this is a new addition, before that, I was solely in charge of the LA River, and I started at the most awkward time to start a new sort of career path. And it was right in May of 2020 when everybody was working from home. So we sort of had to wing it and learn as we go. So what they say, baptism by fire. I'm a 15-year veteran of the U.S. Army. I'm a medically retired Army officer, and I actually started back with the Corps of Engineers in 2017. I actually started as one of the guys in the cleanup crews, picking up the homeless camps. And so I've been in, literally from the bottom, picking up the trash to becoming the project manager and the homeless encampment liaison. This program with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it's fairly new. It started in September of 2020 as a result of the Ranch 2 fire, which had spread and started in Azusa Canyon. So it started in the upper limit of what we call the Reach 12 of the San Gabriel River. And it was an argument, a fight between two homeless individuals who were arguing over a stolen bicycle. And one of them said, well, if I can't have it, the other person can't. So the other person ended up lighting a fire. It was arson. That person's arrested, and so we recognized the explosion of individuals experiencing homelessness within not only Los Angeles County but also Riverside County, the County of Orange, and a lot of sort of rural areas that we serve, and we wanted to come up with this program. So to give you a little bit of background information about the Los Angeles district of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Even though the name says Los Angeles, we're actually quite large. We encompass all of Southern California, all of Arizona, the southern half of Nevada, and a small slice of Utah. Normally, I would be presenting this with a really pretty PowerPoint slide presentation I put together, but unfortunately, the Department of Defense cannot use Zoom. And the reason being is that the servers for Zoom are based in China. And so we are prohibited from being able to log in with our government computers. So whenever we have to attend a Zoom meeting, we have to do it via phone. But Los Angeles District, to give you some more background info, and incorporate 16 dams. We have 61 miles of channels and rivers, 122 miles of levees. We have one debris basin. We cover 226,000 square miles, and we have a population of over 33 million people. In Los Angeles County alone, as of the last homeless point in time count that was conducted by the state and LAHSA, the homeless count was estimated at 63,800 individuals in Los Angeles County alone.
Oh my God.
The nationwide estimate was 580,000.
Oh.
So that tells you the percentage of homeless individuals that are living in Los Angeles County. Now, because of 2021, we did not have a point in time count because of COVID. So the state and the county of Los Angeles and LAHSA, which is the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, just did a recent point in time count, which was back in very late February. I want to say like the 26th, 27th of February. And so they're still extrapolating the numbers and the data from everywhere. They said over the summer we should have a new accurate count, but I can guarantee you that it has grown quite dramatically. So in the last 19 months or so that we've done this, I've personally witnessed the increase in homeless, in especially within U.S. Army Corps of Engineers areas. And if you kind of think about it, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is one of the last great urban landowners in the second largest metropolitan area in the United States. So they have a tendency to want to congregate here and in our areas. So some of the concerns that we wanted to address by coming up with our homeless encampment program was, obviously increased fire risk due to associated criminal activities, warming fires, cooking fires, as well as the threat of arson. There's also a safety and security concern for our employees that work in the dam infrastructures and within our channels and rivers, as well as the infrastructure. If somebody lights a fire next to concrete, that does not do well for the concrete. The concrete will crack, will cause a lot of potential failures, and so there is a grave concern. There's also a grave concern for the safety of the residents of the communities that we serve, and there's a safety issue for the individuals that are actually homeless living in a flood risk management project. It's a very, very unsafe place. Now, granted, we've had a lot of dry years. I think the last wet year was 2018. I'm also an auxiliary dam operator, and so I've worked out at Hansen Dam in Pacoima many nights on night shifts operating that dam. And a lot of people don't realize, but all of these dry dams, when it rains, we actually get activated, and we send mostly a bunch of crusty old combat vets like myself, and we go out in the middle of the night and we operate the gates of the dams to regulate the flows, to ensure that the channels and the rivers don't overtop, and we hold back water. And we have a very sophisticated communication system between us, Los Angeles County Department of Public Works Stormwater Division, and also some of the higher up dams that have water being released from the flood control district, like Morris Dam, San Gabriel Dam, Big Tahunga, et cetera. So some of our best practices that we've learned over the last 18, 19 months of having this program is outreach. Outreach is number one. I used to watch our group picking up trash and debris. We would trespass the people experiencing homelessness out of the riverbed or the river bottom, and then they would stand up on top of the bike path, and they would sit down on the levee where the bike path is and watch us clean up their area. And then the next morning we would drive by and we would see that they had all returned. So by performing extensive outreach through organizations such as LASA, the Department of Veteran Affairs, LA County Department of Mental Health, LA County Department of Public Health, as well as other organizations such as Union Station missions, we try to do our best to offer services and housing options to everybody that we encounter before we perform a homeless encampment debris removal mission. Now, we do rely on law enforcement for the removals. The U.S. Army does not have law enforcement rules and rights within the continental United States outside of an actual military base, and that dates back to Posse Comitatus. And for obvious reasons, you don't want the military to be running around to have civilian law enforcement rights. So we have to coordinate with law enforcement and evict or use the law enforcement to utilize local, municipal, and county rules and regulations and laws to trespass individuals. On part of our flood risk management projects that we own in fee, that we are the actual landowners, then we're able to utilize what's called Title 36 of the United States Federal Code, which prohibits domiciling within federal flood risk management projects. And we have our own internal park rangers that have federal citation authority that can go out, trespass individuals, and remove them from areas that we own. Unfortunately, a lot of the older flood risk management projects, like Bayona Creek, like the Los Angeles River, have held various levels of civilian private partnership in ownership of the properties, as well as Los Angeles County Flood Control District, which owns the majority of the land. So while we operate and maintain it as an agreement to the 1936 Flood Act, we don't actually own the land in fee, and it is not federally owned, and therefore we cannot enforce federal law on those lands. So an example, Bionah Creek, we have to rely on the local municipal government and police department to help enforce those rules. So some of the other best practices that we do outside of law enforcement coordination, O&M debris removal, which is, so when we evict or we trespass or we coordinate the trespassing of individuals within a particular creek, we come in with our own work crews and our dumpsters, and we remove all the footprints of that camp. Because if we don't do that, those individuals will just return immediately. And so it's important that we go ahead and remove all the trash and debris, the empty tarps, the empty tents, and pieces of construction material that are used, and clear that area. And then afterwards, we coordinate with local law enforcement, our own park rangers, LA County Sheriff's Department host team, and we work to maintain that area domicile free. So one of the biggest ways to ensure that is persistence. A lot of the individuals that are homeless in the river bottom or in the channels, they want to have a certain level of anonymity to their life and their lifestyle, which I'm sure we're all sort of tracking what type of lifestyle we're referring to. And they don't want to be bothered. And so persistency is the key. So when you go and you clear out an area and you notice that individuals are trying to re-domicile that particular piece of land, it's important to immediately come back in and perform the exact same action while it's clear. And word gets around. You know, they say, hey, don't come here. They're going to continue to mess with you. This isn't a place that we're able to stay free and clear without being bothered. Some of the other challenges that we have within the Army Corps of Engineers is funding. So the U.S. Army does not have a mission of removing homeless individuals from flood risk management projects. This is an unfunded program, meaning that every dollar I spend on clearing out a homeless encampment is one less dollar that I've been given by Congress to spend on normal O&M or special projects within that particular project. So that's a big challenge. Also, there's mixed support for removal. So a lot of times we know as a team, and when we perform outreach, we go out there with LASA, we go out with law enforcement, we go out there with public works, we go out there with various organizations, and we know that the percentage of individuals that accept services is extremely low. It's low. I did one. Well, we have one coming up in a couple weeks out in Santa Fe, and out of the 20 people, we've had 4 individuals accept services with LASA, and that is a huge success. To get 20 individuals to accept that is big. Most of the time, it's 0. Maybe we'll get 1 or 2. We get a lot more success rate by involving the Department of Veteran Affairs, because the VA can go out and offer extra services and more long-term solutions to veterans, which is fantastic, which is why we always invite them out. But we have mixed support for the removal. Like during COVID, LA County Department of Public Health put out a guidance. It wasn't a rule, but it was a guidance that stated they discourage removing of homeless camps to prevent the spread of COVID within shelters, which it did make sense. But because of that guidance, a lot of other organizations and agencies were pretty much hands off from wanting to do that based off of that guidance. Also, there's a mixed perception within the county and municipal level, because of those individuals that don't accept services, where are they going to go? They're going to go out into the city. So they're going to take their crime, they're going to take their associated activities, setting up a tent somewhere in an alley or on a street or in a city park. If we prevent them from coming into that area, they're just going to go somewhere else. So sometimes we get a little bit of discouragement. Not always, and not saying that that has ever happened within Culver City, but in different areas we've had discouragement where they kind of, when they're in a core land area or one of our debris basins, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind, and there's a small percentage of individuals that prefer it that way. Another challenge is ensuring that we have proper law enforcement MOUs. So those memorandums of understanding between the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and that particular law enforcement agency, making sure we have those put in place to where we are authorizing that law enforcement agency to enforce Title 36 of the U.S. Federal Code on our own lands. With Ballona Creek, that's not a concern. So some of the path forward, some of the concerns for our path forward is continuing to request funding, which we have over the last 18 months, expanding our coordination with outreach services. I also belong to an organization called the Silver Jackets Program, which is a flood risk management program with community involvement spearheaded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And we're addressing some concerns that we have for when there is a atmospheric river or a major rain event. How do we properly notify all of the hundreds of various organizations and agencies that our footprint covers, to notify them to make sure they go in and let all of the homeless individuals know that there's going to be a large rain event and that where they are is unsafe. So we're coming up with that program right now. So expanding our outreach services, I sit on several outreach boards. I sit on the County of Riverside's 2nd District Homeless Encampment Program. I sit on the Northern San Gabriel River Working Group, which is a smaller municipal government working group between Irwindale, Azusa, Duarte, the city of Whittier, and one of the supervisory districts in Los Angeles County on how to try to make a positive change for the individuals that are residing in the San Gabriel River. Signage is important, also physical security enhancements. I can tell you over the last 2 years how many of our Army Corps of Engineer locks that we've had to replace that were broken, how many of our chains, how many of our fences that we had to repair. It's been difficult, and we have so many miles of levees and channels and such a finite amount of money. It's a challenge to try to fix each gate and lock, because we know, and we've experienced it, where we'll go fix a lock that had been broken or clean up a fabric fence that had been cut, and then the very next day we find it cut again. So we're making other physical security enhancements, requesting money, putting expanded metal fencing on our fences, increasing the heights of our fences. All that takes time, because any fence that is greater than 50 years old in the state of California on Army Corps of Engineer property requires what's called SHPO, which is the State Historical Preservation Organization's approval, that's another challenge. We do have an internal ranger program. We have a total of 5 park rangers and 1 supervisory park rangers for our entire footprint. So we're expanding that program. It started about 2 years ago, and we're trying to get a greater presence. And we rely on our park rangers tremendously. They come out with me. I personally perform outreach, and I talk to the individuals that are homeless because I want to know why they're there. I want to have a better understanding of why they're in our area, and how can we help them, and how can we elevate them out of homelessness. Because for every individual that we elevate out of homelessness and we get them to accept services, is one less individual that I know that will just go into the city or try to come back. So those are sort of our concerns. We do have a guiding document in certain authorities. Again, this was September of 2020, we wrote a district regulation, and we're the only district in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that has a homeless encampment policy and an actual regulation. So in Army speak, a regulation is a law. So District Regulation 1130-2-1 is our homeless encampment policy on civil works project lands. And it was approved and signed by our district engineer, who is a full bird colonel. Her name is Colonel Julie Bolton, in October 2020. And again, this was published following the Ranch 2 fire. Our authority for that document is United States Federal Code Title 36, Chapter 3, which is camping on civil works project lands. And basically, it states that camping is permitted only at specific sites or areas designated by the district commander, as well as unauthorized occupation, which is occupying lands, vessels, or other facilities within a water resource development project for the purpose of maintaining the same as a full or part-time residence without the written permission of the district commander. So we started getting, as a group, as a district, I started getting a lot of I wouldn't call them complaints, because I don't consider them a complaint. I consider them an issue or a concern that has been brought to me into my knowledge. But we didn't have the resources and the capabilities to address multiple. I don't have a whole work crew that's on standby. I have about 40 some individuals throughout our tri-state area, and they're also involved in regular operations and maintenance and performing, various functions within the channels. And so we had to come up with a decision matrix. And so the homeless encampment removal, debris removal, and vegetation management activities are all determined by a certain safety and operational impact criteria. So that criteria is number one, safety. So, and that's broken up into 3 different subsections. So encampment locations that threaten the safety of the trespasser. Multiple times we have had individuals who have set up a tent directly behind one of our operating gates in Whittier Narrows at one of the dams. I believe it was San Gabriel Spillway, which is one of the dams within Whittier Narrows. And there was a rain event coming, and that gate was going to open up water, and that person would have drowned. So we were able to forego the traditional 72-hour notification, coordinate with LA County Sheriff's Department host team, which is a homeless outreach services team. It's headed by a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Diedrich. And we were able to get that individual placed into one of the winter shelters immediately within 24 hours. Also, encampment locations that threaten the safety of USACE personnel, which is USACE, United States Army Corps of Engineer personnel. We had a lot of issues where we had individuals threatening our personnel while they were doing work. They would set up a camp right next to a control house, say at Sepulveda Dam, and start fires, throw rocks at the vehicles. And that was a big concern, making sure that the safety of our employees is brought into the mix. And then encampment locations that threaten the safety of residents, so such as these fires. I know Carolyn had told me that there was a fire recently in Biona Creek, and that's a big concern of mine. That bothers me to know that callous behavior of that individual that is homeless could cause somebody's home from burning down. And I feel that I have a direct responsibility as the project manager and homeless encampment liaison to address that. The other concern is impact to major O&M activities and then minor O&M activities. So O&M stands for operations and maintenance. A major activity would be we're removing some, say 100,000 cubic yards of sediment in a river to reduce the flood risk of that particular river. And there's some homeless encampments that are on there. So that's an issue. We do several homeless encampment debris removal projects a year. This year alone, we have performed 3 homeless encampments. The most recent one was during Easter weekend. So that was the only time we had available. And of course, I'd much rather have been home with my family, but we were out there over the whole weekend cleaning up trash and debris out of the Rio Hondo, and it was a big concern for us. We also did another one a couple weeks before that within the Whittier Narrows Nature Center. And then we did a large cleanup within the San Gabriel River at the confluence of San Jose Creek that cost us as taxpayers about $225,000. And it was a cleanup of an area of about 200 acres in size, which in a riverbed, that's a massive amount. And it took a lot of months of planning and a lot of hours of outreach. But we have had a very successful program, which has worked really well. So we have been aware of the issues in Ballona Creek. It was brought to our attention a few months ago. We did initially go through the contracting process, pay for dumpsters for this proposed cleanup coming up. Anything in the federal government that costs greater than $3,000, I cannot use a credit card for it. So I have to go through an entire contract. And if anybody has ever had experience in government and doing a contract, it is awful. So it's a lot of frustration. So we knew in advance that this was going to happen, that the camps were starting to grow, especially under the National Boulevard Bridge area. And so we went ahead and did a contract for dumpsters. So everybody knows, our area of Ballona Creek that we operate and maintain is fairly small. I think it's about 1.5 miles, maybe 1.4 miles in length, but it goes from Washington Boulevard to LaSalle Avenue. The bike path, the path on the other side, is part of a 710 agreement with the city of Culver City. And so we had initially reached out to the city of Culver City a little while ago and spoke to Helen Chin, who is the assistant to the city manager on homelessness. I also spoke to a gentleman by the name of Mordecai Nickerson, who is the public works inspector. He also had emailed me after we knew about the issue and had shared some of the concerns that you all have had as a group. So the city of Culver City has been fantastic. They have linked me up with several individuals, Captain Pete Hernandez with Culver City Police Department, as well as Lieutenant Andrew Bayante, who are my point of contacts. And then a couple new individuals who will be working on this project, Aramis White and Onyx Jones, will be sort of handling this project moving forward on behalf of Helen Chin and the city of Culver City. So one of my biggest concerns in Ballona Creek is the area around National Boulevard. It has a lot of small cross-line jurisdictions, meaning you go up another 100 feet and you have LA Metro and you have LAPD Transit Bureau in charge of that area. And then you go on top of the levees, you have the city of Culver City, who are in charge of the bike path, according to the 710 agreement, and then the Army Corps of Engineers. So as a good steward of our nation's resources and your taxpayer dollars, and based off of my experience, if I go in tomorrow and I just clean up my area, it will do absolutely nothing, because those individuals know the jurisdictional lines better than we do. And they will just stand up and they will go walk over to the bike path, put up their tent on the bike path, and wait till we're done cleaning it up. So I started reaching out to LA Metro, who has a few bridges of areas right next to us in National Boulevard. I believe it's a total of 3 bridges they're in charge of. There's also a gentleman by the name of Officer Wheat from LAPD Transit Bureau, who's been assisting us. Like I said, Culver City has been very receptive. And then I also reached out to LA County Department of Public Works, who has been planning a cleanup within their area. So I spoke to Jamel Cruz, and they'll be doing a cleanup underneath the Overland Avenue Bridge, and they're planning on that cleanup. I'm not sure of the dates yet. We've sort of been in a little bit of a holding pattern, waiting for LA Metro to get their approval. A lot of times getting the city of LA to agree to do something can be a little bit more of a challenge than us, or the county can be a little bit more of a challenge than us. but we would like to see a complete project done simultaneously. So the opportunity for the individuals experiencing homelessness are greater. So they know that they can't just walk up the hill or go 100 feet down the riverbed and pop up their tent somewhere else. They know that this area is now off limits, and they will have a greater opportunity to want to accept services and help and elevate themselves out of homelessness and not return. So that being said, my invitation to LA Metro is not infinite. We will be making a decision shortly in the next couple weeks if we don't hear back from them on a hard date. I've already let the city of Culver City know that we'll be doing our own internal planning if we can't get Metro to commit to a date. So that is my portion of today's meeting, or this evening's meeting, and I want to welcome any questions that you may have. And if I don't have an answer for it right now, I will assure you that I will go back and make sure I get you that answer.
Thank you, Trevor. That was great. That was a lot of information. I'm curious with my question, and then if anyone else has a question, please raise your hand and I will call on you and Trevor can answer. So Trevor, you mentioned that you try to talk to everybody that is homeless, and you try to find out the reason why they're there. So what is the main reason that you have heard that they're there?
Yeah, great question. So you will hear from them, their interpretation. A lot of times they're very honest about the reason why, but the number one reason is substance abuse. Substance abuse followed by mental health issues, mental illness, or drug-induced psychosis and drug-induced mental health issues have prevented them from sustaining and holding a permanent job. Then they lose, they become homeless. They lose their mental health medication. Then they turn to substance abuse to try to self-medicate themselves. And then they don't have the money to pay for their substance abuse issues. So then they resort to associated criminal activities to supply their substance abuse problems. So very rarely will we find, and I have seen it. I've seen it before where there's individuals who just couldn't get a place. They couldn't afford a place. They might have been migrants, and they couldn't afford a living situation. But those are the individuals that accept services first. Those are the ones that don't want to be there. They do not like where they are. They don't like the communities that have been built around them. And so they, in my experience, those are the first individuals that will accept LAHSA's help or the VA's help or, Operation Room Key or one of the winter shelters to try to get them back on their feet. The rest of the individuals is a challenge. So they have to sort of hit rock bottom first before they accept help. And what is that rock bottom? I don't know what their rock bottom is. Nobody knows what their individual rock bottom is. But as the homeless encampment liaison, I'm going to make sure that I don't facilitate that and low or increase their rock bottom. I want to make sure that it's hit as soon as possible and that they get the help that they need.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Phil, you're up next, and then Kelly. Go ahead, Phil.
Trevor, is there any data that you're aware of which shows which is more effective, having social services take the lead and call you into the situation, or you taking the lead and calling social services in while you're working? Is there any data behind that?
I have never been called by social services for a cleanup at all. The only time that I've been called.
Oh, I just mean they're counseling someone and they say, all right, this person's ready to move. Army Corps of Engineers come in and clear the space.
We have never been asked by an organization or some sort of social services agency to come in and clear a space.
Okay.
We've always been the initiator. Now, I will say that there's been certain council districts of Los Angeles, like CD7, CD13, and CD6, who have been proactive within their council districts in the city of Los Angeles, specifically within Sepulveda Basin and within the LA River, like Elysian Valley and Atwater Village, who have brought multiple groups together, sort of like what I'm doing here in Bayona Creek, and say, hey, we have a problem, let's try to fix it. So they have done that, but we have never been asked by an agency to say, hey, this person wants to leave, go ahead and clean it up now.
Thank you, Trevor. Kelly, you're up next. Unmute.
Oops. Trevor, thank you very much for your presentation, and I want to give you a special thanks for your time spent on cleaning up trash, cleaning up rivers and whatnot. That's kind of a sore point with me, something I won't do, but I know somebody has to do it, and so thank you very much. Yeah, some of those names you mentioned from Culver City helping you, good luck. I look forward to hearing an update on that. And thank you for your honesty, you know, that you're pointing out a lot of things that I already believed. I mean, you just read the LA Times and the people being interviewed aren't from LA. You know, it's more of a migrant mental health issue. In the numbers that you mentioned, based on the current counts, as a nation, have we decided not to look at the migrant type issue, or do you know how many of that 60,000 in LA are migrants from other areas?
Kelly, great question. Great question. So I mentioned earlier one of my working group meetings, the North San Gabriel River Working Group, and the municipal government there contracted with a company that does a more extensive homeless count. So instead of just going out there, you know, and saying, no, there's 63,000 homeless people, they take demographic information. And I think that's important. And that's one of the questions I always ask them. I asked them, what high school did you go to? And I can tell you about 2/3 of the time, that high school is out of state, right? So we're sort of a hotbed and a focal point for homelessness because of our fair weather, because of welcoming politics and services that are provided. You know, there's a lot of organizations that go out and feed the homeless. They provide showers. We've had several instances on Army Corps owned land where we had groups coming in and we had to send them a cease and desist letter saying you're not to provide services for individuals. So, and not to sound callous, right? But if you were on a safari and you wanted to take a photograph of something, you're not going to go out into the barren desert. You're going to go to like a watering hole, and that's where you're going to find the greater congregation, you know, of what you want to look at. And don't confuse this analogy in any way of me trying to dehumanize these individuals.
Right.
Because the work that we do is done with empathy and is done with compassion. Because at the end of the day, they are still people. And there's somebody that still loves that person. There's still a brother, a sister, you know, a father, a mother, or a child somewhere out there that still loves that person and wants to help that person. So that's why, you know, if you were able to see my presentation, which I'll send out, you know, there's some law enforcement sensitive stuff in there I'll remove, but I'll send it out to everybody if I can get the distribution list. And I want you guys to have my contact information as well. But the number one thing, with this is trying to elevate them out of homelessness. And that's a win-win, because we're going to help this person. We're going to help them be safe. We're going to help the residents be safe. And then we're not going to have to spend taxpayer dollars cleaning it up back up again. So that's my ultimate goal. And I tell you, I don't know who I pissed off in the Army when I was given this job, but over the 2 years or so that I've had it, or 19 months or so that I've had it, I've thoroughly enjoyed making an impact. And I've dedicated my whole life since I was 17 when I joined the Army. I've dedicated my whole life to serving my nation, and to be able to come home and I can switch out my rifle and my IBA ballistic armor, and I can change it to, I carry Narcan when I go out, and I have, a pair of Red Wing boots, and I can go out and I can continue my service to my country and make a difference to the people that we serve. That's important to me, and I have a great passion. So I appreciate this entire group's patience. I know there's a lot of you that will say, why don't we just kick them out and get rid of them? And I feel exactly, and trust me, there was a state in which I was like, yeah, why don't we just, when I first found out I was going to take on this job, let's just get rid of them. But there's a lot more nuance and finesse that's involved into ensuring that it doesn't come back. And they're going to come back. I'm going to be perfectly candid with everybody. There's going to be a small group of people that are going to want to come back. We experience that recidivism quite regularly, but being persistent and letting them know this is not a safe place for you to be. If you come back, I'm going to continue to bother you and annoy you and kick you back out again. At some point, that's going to be somebody's low point, and they're going to turn around and get help, maybe go home. LA County Sheriff's Department host team is a bastion. It's a pillar for success for that. They send people, they'll go out and get you a bus ticket or a plane ticket. They'll call your mom out of state or your estranged wife or whoever, and they say, hey, I got so-and-so, he wants help. Let's get them the help they need. And we will send them back to wherever they need to be, which I think LA Sheriff's Department host team has done a fantastic job. And that is the benchmark for success for any homeless encampment services project. And I work quite closely with the sheriffs, and I have the utmost respect for them and what they do. And I try to mirror a lot of my own personal outreach, and it's not perfect. I'm still learning. The goal line changes quite regularly. COVID was a big change, and for us to try to fluctuate and adapt to the issues at hand. Post-COVID is going to be something else. Our economy is going to affect homelessness within Southern California and the nation as a whole, and we have to learn. And so that's why it's, I told my boss, I said, if you want me to do this, I need a day once a week that I'm going to go out there. I'm going to talk to them and learn. So I think what North San Gabriel River Working Group is doing is getting that demographic information is so imperative, because it's telling us a bigger picture, right? We call it in the Army a horse blanket. And it's telling us, okay, so we now know that 2/3 of the individuals that are homeless are not even from here. And so, if I could be frank with you, when I was growing up as a kid, I grew up in Whittier. We had homeless people in Whittier, homeless Bob or whatever, but he was from there. He was from Whittier. And so he didn't destroy the area that he lived in. He had a substance abuse problem or something, but he grew up and lived there, and he didn't, rob the local businesses and rob, homes and create fire hazards. Whereas you have this influx of migrants, internal within the U.S. Coming in who don't give a shit about our community. They don't care about Culver City. They don't care about your group. They care about maintaining their certain lifestyle, and that's the real challenge. And we have to sort of push our thumb down and find out more about what is occurring within our communities. And that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you very much for your honest presentation.
Yes, thank you, Trevor. And it really confirms what we've been saying. So I appreciate that a lot, your honesty. Meg, you're up next, then Robin. Everyone else, please keep yourself muted, okay?
Thank you so much for taking your time, your evening to talk to us. Since you've been talking, I emailed a friend whose son is in the Army, and I'm like, hey, has Grant looked into the Army Corps of Engineers? I feel like this could be an opportunity for him. The compassion, just the general awareness that you have presented is really, really valuable. I don't really know what my question is, honestly. I'm a housing provider on a parallel bike path. We're at National near Washington, and I just feel like whenever there's a clampdown in one part of the city, then the problems come to our area. Over the past decade of housing dozens of people basically at cost, my husband and I have planted close to 5 blocks with just spiky plants to prevent some sort of homeless encampments, but now we're seeing them, and the city just is incapable on some level of helping us. We've lost tenants. There's been a fire. There's been all sorts of problems. We're just kind of at our wits' end. What is the solution? I guess is my question.
Right. I don't know what the solution is. It is tough. It's a tough job. It needs to be bigger than us. It needs to be bigger than you, me. It needs more support in the state level. LA County is struggling and doing what they can with their explosion, but if you look at the numbers, you've got 20% of all homeless people in the United States are within Los Angeles County. As far as deterrence, I mean, you can't just put deterrence up in every particular spot, of land, because then it's just going to turn into an eyesore. And you know what they're going to do? They're just going to move into the bike path, like directly instead of off to the easement. They're going to move their tent right on the bike path. And then you're going to have a loss of services for the, recreational services for the individuals who work hard, who belong to a real community. I would suggest continue to engage at the federal level with your congressional representatives, with the state level. What is the state of California doing? It's such a challenge. But I don't have that. I wish I had that answer. And I have a feeling, honestly, that at the end of my career, I still won't know what the answer is, because the causation is something very challenging. Substance abuse, mental health issues. It's going to take a very strong, comprehensive program to try to address all these problems. How do we stop, substance abuse? Well, gosh, we've been in the drug war since, Reagan years, and it hasn't stopped at all. Mental health issues, increasing access to mental health services, trying to remove that stigma from individuals that, hey, if you need mental health. I come from the Army. I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was wounded in Afghanistan. And a lot of the individuals in my platoon didn't want to have any help for their PTSD because there's a stigma, right? There is a stigma involved that there's something wrong with you if you want to seek out mental health. And hopefully that culture change. I think really it's a cultural change as a society that we need to go through to try to help address this. But I have a strong feeling that after I'm long gone and retired from the Army, that I still won't have an answer and a solution to everything. It's definitely bigger than me.
What I liked about your comment, I mean, besides everything, was the emphasis on family reunification. At a certain point, it feels to me like society or the street or sidewalks are being asked to take on something that previously was a family issue. And I'm glad that you're trying to unify people with their families.
Yeah, it's important. I know back in the day it was sort of a stigma, but if you're homeless, they'd put you on a bus and ship you out somewhere else. We just had to make sure we shipped you out to the right place and not to somebody else's problem. Reunification with family and having that support structure is critical. It's a family issue too, and maybe a parental issue, upbringing of individuals, learning right from wrong. I can tell you, my kids know the difference between right and wrong, but things have changed over our generations, and maybe we're losing a grasp on that. I don't know. Now I'm just hypothesizing on what we can do, but we do try, and the LA Sheriff's Department host team is fantastic about that. I cannot say enough good things about them. There are such a small group within the LA Sheriff's Department, and they just work their butt off on trying to help out, and they do it with compassion and empathy, and but a hard line, tough love, right? At the end of the day, they want to make sure that you're safe and that your rights are being preserved.
Not in Culver City. Thank you, Trevor. Robin, you're next, and then Jane.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. This is Robin Turner. I have a couple things. First of all, I don't know if you know this or not, but the city of Culver City requests people who are homeless to come to Culver City. They are very proactive in their in getting homeless people to Culver City. So we have more of an issue than a lot of places do. But I want to also disclose that I'm an archaeologist and a paleontologist, work on all your rivers, where it's Rio Hondo, it's San Gabriel, it's from with the Army Corps of Engineer, like at Tillman and on Haskell Creek and Sepulveda Dam and all that, and also other areas. And what we find is, of course, that it's really hard to do archaeological and paleontological surveys or do construction when people have guns. So part of the problem is not only the mental health, but it's the issue of other issues of criminals that became homeless because they want to be off the grid. But one of the questions, well, first, one more thing. I had some cousins that came out from Iowa who were birders, and they went to Bologna Creek, and I told them not to, and they were frightened, and they will never come back to California because of they were scared of how many homeless there were. So my real question for you is, how can we make it safe for the residents who pay the taxes and to take care of everything, and yet also be able to take care of the homeless? Now, before I give you that question to answer, part of the problem is when Ronald Reagan was our governor, and he took away the mental health facilities a long time ago, and then we lost our redevelopment agencies throughout the state. So we didn't have homeless or people being able to go into low-income housing. So with that in mind, I just want to know what is your suggestion on how to keep us safe as property owners, and we pay property taxes, and our safety, and still take care of the homeless situation as is today?
Yeah, great question, Robin. Thank you. And thank you for your archaeological work. I know every one of my homeless encampment debris removal projects, that's how I have to word it. I consult with one of our own internal archaeologists of, what should we look for while we're cleaning up debris, and if we uncover something of, archaeological find, we do tribal consultation and SHPO consultation. So these projects take a lot of effort, in the back end. In order, we have to do categorical exclusions and NEPA documentation. So I get what you're saying about the mental health issues, and that's a big thing. I think, this is just Trevor talking. I can't be a representation of the federal government on, oh well, the Army Corps thinks this, because this is just my personal opinion. But I think we do have softened mental health rules. It takes quite a bit to do what's called a 5150 in the state of California to get them help. I've witnessed it only twice in all of my camp cleanups. I had a female throw a bottle of urine on me, and so she was put into a 5150 mental health evaluation. I had another person who threatened to stab me and had a knife on him up in the northern San Gabriel River, and that person was placed on a 5150 hold. But there's other people you can tell needs mental health. I would just say continue to elect the right people in the office who support the strengthening of I know. Well, it's a challenge, but you gotta do that. That's more of a political question, really, and a political solution, and addressing that. I mean, the federal government can't. And I'm not even a representative of the federal government. I'm a representative of the U.S. Army, and so we have very limited powers, within the continental United States for the right reasons. Of course, I strongly believe in that. So, I would bring that up with your local elected officials at the state level, state Senate, state assembly, and your congressional level. But it is unsafe. My own channel maintenance contractor. I have a contractor that goes through Ballona Creek. I have a contractor that goes through the LA River, and they cannot go anywhere near these homeless encampments. And you're right. There's also a certain element that is a criminal element. And again, that sort of tied into my anonymity comment that I made. And I have to be cautious of the words that I use, right? So, because the last thing I want to do is find myself no longer the homeless encampment liaison, because I don't know if the next guy is going to do, a good job or not. So I'm passionate about this work, and I want to see this work through. And but our own channel maintenance contractor was carjacked in the LA River a couple months ago. They actually shot at us in the LA River underneath the First Street Bridge, and they were gang members. They shot at us. They shot our truck, a federally owned truck. They stole our truck, but they were too dumb to get the truck out of the river. They didn't know how, so they ended up abandoning it by, I want to say it's Olympic Boulevard. They just left it there, and they ended up not taking anything. But that was a challenge. We also feel unsafe. I go in without body armor, and that's something that I'm looking for now, is to increase my own personal safety and security. I can't carry a firearm when I go on there because it's outside of a military base. I have to rely on police services. I can't impose on a police agency to have a police officer follow me every time I'm picking up trash. And so the only thing we have to do is, unfortunately, in areas that the U.S. Army does not own or that we don't own and see, we have to skip those areas. So if you go in the LA River, you're going to notice there's these sort of pockets of homeless camps that have grown together, and that's because we have to avoid it because of safety concerns. So I don't have an answer for you, but it was a good, valid point, Robin.
I just want to give you one more question. I mean, one more statement to help you feel better. And that is, we're doing the Venice Dual Force Main project in Venice, Marina del Rey, and Playa Vista along the Bologna Creek. And there was one really unique homeless individual that I'd hire if I could. He literally was sitting in, made his camp inside one of the 60-inch pipes that were going in for storm drain there. And he had a cell, a cell site on top of on the pipe. It's a 6 foot long pipe. And then he had enough solar that he ended up getting a TV and a little refrigerator and an air conditioner in the pipe itself. So there are some people that are really smart. They just kind of want to be homeless because they want to be off the grid. So there's those people too. But I'm really afraid when I'm doing surveys, especially when I'm in the larger rivers, or in the storm drains itself, that we're at risk. And so that's why I just wanted to tell you about that. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I share your concern. I truly do. I truly do. And I understand your concern, and I share it.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks for sharing that. That's pretty impressive. Jane, you're up next, then Kin, then Marcy.
Thanks, Rafia and Jeff, for bringing Trevor to us. And Trevor, thank you so much for your time and your candor here. I have 7 questions, but I'm only going to ask you 2 in the interest of time. Really, really interesting information. First of all, I was curious. This is my first question. I was curious to find out if the Army Corps of Engineers has used drones or considered implementing security camera systems in certain areas of the Bologna Creek.
So we have used drone. We do have a drone program. For homeless encampment removal projects, we mostly request drone usage through the local police department. Montebello PD is a good example. LA Sheriff's Department host, Irwindale, and City of Azusa have all assisted us. I have also done overflight in a UH-60 Blackhawk. I'm also a Miller validator, so I can sort of validate my own helicopter when I need to. But it conflicts with my strong distaste of flying, so I try to not fly as much as possible in a helicopter. But if necessary, I have done it before in the past. We have drones. We utilize them for more of like maintenance on our dams, access to hard to reach spots. Also during nesting season, which is between March 15th and September 15th, we're very cognizant of not violating the MBTA, which is the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I am a wildlife conservationist myself, and I feel very strongly for birds, but I'm also a waterfowl hunter. So, I sort of have a dual purpose there. We want to conserve the birds, but also I personally want to conserve them so I can continue to responsibly harvest them. We also have a lot of endangered species. We have the least bell vireo, we have the California gnatcatcher. So we do use drones within the Armed Corps of Engineers, but we have not utilized our drones internally for homeless encampment projects. I try to go out to local law enforcement because it's very, very expensive for us to use our drones. I don't know why, but it's upwards of like $5,000 an hour. And the drones that the Army give us are very powerful, very strong. We have to get, you know, an FAA flight pass. We have to get somebody who is certified as a pilot from the U.S. Army. So it gets really expensive. And what was your other part of the question? Sorry.
Security cameras, but Culver City PD also has a drone program, FYI. But my other part of the first question was about security cameras in real high risk, potentially high risk areas.
We have them. They're expensive. We just started putting them up at a couple of our dam locations like Sepulveda and Hanson, Whittier Narrows as well. Some of the Teacup dams in Orange County, which is Fullerton, Carbon Canyon, and Brea, I believe also have it. And our base yard maintenance facility, which is in the city of South El Monte, also has security cameras. But with that comes an immense amount of cost. And if again, I'll go back to my statement. If anybody knows, you know, like I said, the contracting process, if you know the budgetary process of the federal government, this last February and March, we submitted our budget request for fiscal year 2024. So it takes about 18 months for us to submit a budget process and a request. So a lot of the things we're just starting to receive are things that I had requested when I first started the job. And so we are requesting additional funding, additional security camera, but nothing in the channels because, again, we don't own the land in fee. So that would be something that we would have to work out with real estate. We have to work out with the individual parcel landowners, the ability to put up a camera system. And then what do we do with that camera system, right? What do we do with it? If we see somebody, who do we do? Do we call Culver City PD? Do we call? So I think that's going to be a bit of a heavy lift, and it's not something that we're going to discount, but I think that's something that would be more of a long-term project.
Understood. It's always often comes down to money. I understand budgets. And then my last question is you mentioned about having MOUs with associated agencies. And then you said that is not a concern in Culver City. Is that because you have MOUs with Culver City Police Department, Los Angeles Sheriffs, and any other law enforcement agencies that are in our area?
We have a MOU with Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD. We have an MOU with Alex Villanueva with LASD. We do not have one with Culver City, but the reason why it's not a concern is we do not own the land. So we cannot enforce Title 36 rules and regulations in Ballona Creek because we don't own the property. So it is basically Culver City enforcing its municipal rules and laws and regulations in their land, in the city-owned land, or the county, the sheriff's department enforcing county rules and regulations within Ballona Creek, because most of it is actually owned by Los Angeles County Flood Control District. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's weird the way it's kind of broken up into those sections along the creek in various areas. Because when I worked for transportation, Culver City Transportation, and there was graffiti, it depended on which little section the graffiti was where we had to call, who we had to call to have it removed. Right. So it gets rather complex along that strip that goes through Culver City. But thank you very much for your answers and your time.
Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks, Trevor. Okay, Kim, you're up next, and Marcy.
Thank you, Rafia. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Snyder. Thanks for joining us this evening, and thank you for your service. I have 4 questions, but I'd like to ask the 2 first that's been on my mind. I was curious how many of those homeless folks that you've encountered had already an encounter with the St. Joseph's, which is our outreach arm of Culver City. That's number one. Number two, and what kind of success rate have you had in terms of finding a disposition for the homeless folks? And the other flip side is, what kind of recidivism have you seen in your experience? If you could comment on those first two issues, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem. I do not have any information about who's been contacted by St. Joseph's at all. I don't have that information. If you have a good contact number for them, I would love to absolutely get that information, and then maybe I can do some follow-up questions with the individuals. You're saying disposition. Could you expound upon that? What do you mean by what disposition?
Well, it would be prevention of return to their previous location where you found them, so to speak. Have you been able to? Yeah.
So as far as recidivism as well, you're gonna get an average of 5% of individuals that will accept services. They'll accept services, about 5%, and you'll get in a year on some of the projects that we've done, you'll get about 40% that will return. The rest will end up going somewhere else. And we keep a track of who we've made contact with. We keep a track of who we've cited and trespassed from our property. We keep a track of personal property as well, because when we're doing a cleanup, we don't throw it all away. If we find something that is a piece of mail, a legal document, prescription medication, identification, credit cards, passports, we hold on to it for 90 days. We leave a notification in the area that we've removed and a small description of what we removed and who they should call to try to retrieve those items. Now, granted, most of the time they're stolen credit cards, stolen IDs. I just found a baby's passport. I'm going to hold on to for 90 days. And then at the end of the 90 days, I'm going to mail it back to the State Department with a little letter saying, hey, I found this in the camp, blah, blah, blah. No one's going to come back to me and call me and be like, hey, you have my stolen credit cards. I like them back. We'll contact the bank or the DMV and mail back IDs, so that way they can kind of mark it off their system. But I'd say about 40%. And then the rest of the 5, maybe 10% if we're lucky, we'll just end up going somewhere else. And, it's a shame. It's a challenge. We've had people accept services and they were immediately kicked out that same day and tried coming back while we were in the middle of cleaning up their camp. They're like, oh, hey, no, I'm back now. Like, no, you're not back. Get out of here. So it's hard. I hope that answered.
Yeah, you've answered question number 1 and number 2. If I could ask question number 3 and 4. Have you encountered any veterans? And if you have encountered them, whether you've been able to connect them with the West LA VA, where they're being housed in tents while they're building hostels for them? That's my third question.
Yeah, so actually the guy that I go out with, his name is Dominic, and he's from West LA, or what they call GLA, Greater LA VA. Right. And they'll connect them either to Long Beach or somewhere in the West LA VA system. I know one of my dearest friends is helping out with that sort of homeless village that the VA has been building. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger paid personally for like 25 of those units, those sort of boxable little units. And I think they have a great program. So we normally get a much higher rate from veterans
Mhm.
who about 50% of the time they will accept services and accept help because the services and help is more long term. A lot of times we get, issues like, well, like, I'm going to go with my girlfriend. Well, unless you're married, I think within LA County, they won't pair you up. They'll put you in two separate units.
Mhm.
Or if you have a dog, LA County Animal Control will just take the dog if it's not licensed. So they don't want to get help because of that.
Right.
I've experienced that. I've experienced that a few times. So, but the VA does a terrific job, and they're tied in with us and the work we do, and we're tied into the work they do, and
Yep.
I think they have a great program.
Fantastic. Last question here, which is more hypothetical than anything else. If we had universal health care, could the mental health issues be addressed adequately? That's my last question. Thank you.
I can't comment on that. That's purely political, and I cannot, as a federal employee, provide a stance on that. I just think that at least at a minimum, the state of California needs to, I would say, toughen up their mental health rules, and then reopen a lot of the hospitals like that were closed. I know Norwalk was closed. That was a local hospital that individuals were able to get help. But as far as whether universal health care could help, I don't know.
Thank you for your answers. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kin. Thank you, Trevor. Next up is Marcy and then Jeff. And I think that's the last of the questions for you, Trevor, okay? Go ahead, Marcy.
Okay.
First, thank you, Trevor, for taking the time and as everyone else has been being so frank and honest with us with what you're having to deal with and what you're trying to do. We really appreciate it. I would like to say, and then I will get to a question, but so I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day because she's actually a nurse. She works in the VA. She has been working with the mentally ill and for a very long time. That's one of her specialties. And she actually teaches nursing as well. And from what she was saying is that that with the mentally ill, they really can't live on their own. They need the help, if that makes sense, that they cannot take care of themselves. They need the help. And she was also saying that a number of these vets are very dangerous. And so living amongst a group of people, some of these people can't live with people either. And so, but they do need the help. I guess one of my questions is how many of the people that you have come across, what percentage, just a guesstimate, do you think are actually veterans, or have you been able to determine are actually veterans as opposed to the people that are coming from out of state?
Yeah, good question. So veteran wise, I'd say like maybe 10% at the most, at the greatest, are veterans. 5 to 10% are veterans. I don't agree with the statement that the veterans are more dangerous than others.
No, she said that some of them were. That there were some that were very dangerous. Not all of them.
And I would say I would sort of rebuttal to that would be, well, there's some of the homeless that are more dangerous than others. I've had great conversations with several homeless people that I felt non-threatened by, and then I had some, like the lady who threw urine at me, and the guy who tried to stab me. So, and some of them, and we know, and we when we go in there, I work very closely with law enforcement. A lot of the law enforcement individuals have sort of ended up being a good friend of mine, or we've had offline conversations about our work. And, a lot of them are sort of put on these task forces for a year or two or three or longer with, like, say, the LA Sheriff's Department. And so we all kind of talk and, like, hey, what do you think about this problem? And, we sort of consult with each other on the best practices. And, but I would say, maybe 5 to 10% at the most are actual veterans, or that are willing to say that they're veterans, because there's a lot that, there's a lot of generations out there, like the Vietnam veteran generation, that really don't want to be bothered, and they don't want to talk about it because they were treated a lot differently than I was. I was a veteran of the Iraq War in 2003, and then I was in Afghanistan in 2009. I was a convoy commander in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, and then I ended my tour of duty in 2013. So I worked for the Army from 1998 to 2013. So it's quite an interesting time period, where when in 1998, you saw somebody with a combat patch on, you'd say, oh, wow, how'd you get that? And they would tell you either Vietnam or, the last group of Vietnam veterans that were still in, or, Panama or Grenada. And then, as we got into the mid 2000s, late 2000s, you see somebody who didn't have a combat patch. You said, "Oh, how'd you not get out? How'd you get out of that?" So they do need special help. Everybody struggles with PTSD in a different way. Internally, my platoon out of 42 individuals, there's 9 of us that received Purple Hearts that were wounded, and since then we've had 4 suicides. Individuals that unfortunately weren't able to readapt to society. So you're always going to come across those individuals. But that's what the VA is for, and the Greater LA VA does a good job with that homeless outreach. I have personal opinions on the VA, which I won't discuss, but on their medical care side, but on the homeless side, in the homeless outreach side, they really do care, and they do offer a lot of great services for people, and we really rely on them to help.
Yeah, she was
They do a fantastic job.
she was expressing frustration where she had a woman come in who was homeless, who did have mental health issues, but she had been assaulted, and she came in for help, and my friend was trying to find her a place to stay the night. And she said, I couldn't, not one homeless shelter had a bed available for this woman who'd just been assaulted. And, I couldn't get a hotel room for her because they were requiring an ID. And she's like, how many homeless people do you know actually have an ID? Were able to maintain, keep their ID, and because stuff gets stolen all the time. So she was very frustrated with everything that was going on. But, she does see a lot at the VA, and she was, she was frustrated with how little they were able to do. That much I would say.
Yeah, I mean, everybody will have a different experience. I've experienced situations where, individuals weren't able to get a shelter for whatever reason. And, again, that goes back to, that's a societal problem with society. If we're talking about outside of the VA, which is different, but, LA County's got a challenge because nobody wants to have a homeless shelter next to them, right? So everybody will get upset and write letters and file complaints and say, I don't want that next to me. So where do you put it? Where do you put that homeless shelter? Like Operation Room Key or the winter shelters, and they try to rent out, hotels and stuff like that. It's hard. It's difficult because the double-edged sword. A lot of people, they want this problem fixed, but then at the same time, they're like, well, I don't want that problem next to me now. So it is a challenge. And I don't envy the mission that LASA has. And they have a tough one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy. Thank you, Trevor. And then Jeff, my husband here, wants to ask you some questions.
Thank you. Hey, Trevor, thanks again. Hey, something you talked about a little bit earlier, which was you were talking about migrants and migrations primarily from other states by inquiring with that question regarding their high school they attended. Do you find through your interactions and interviews that we're actually seeing basically illegal residents here, people from across the border, that you're coming across?
So that's one thing I don't ask. I don't ask their citizenship status. I don't know if legally I'm able to. Maybe that's something I can take back to my office of counsel and I can ask them. I can make an assumption. Yeah, there's probably a group of them. But I would say that those individuals that didn't speak English, and I can only make an assumption based off of their capability of speaking English or not, is fairly low. I would say probably like 20%. Maybe even lower than 20% of the individuals don't speak English. And so from that, what kind of assumption could we make? I don't know. That's sort of a tough one, and I don't know if I can even answer that.
Yeah, I just never see that really addressed, and was just kind of wondering. I wasn't even thinking about it until you mentioned and used the word migrant in context to people from out of state.
If you ask me if I think this is an immigration problem, I would say no. Based off of my experiences, I would say this is not an immigration problem, that this is a substance abuse problem and a mental health crisis issue. And I would say the amount of people that are immigrants, in my thought, is a lot lower. I would say that that's not a large contributing factor.
Okay.
And I believe in legal immigration personally. So, I believe in legally doing it, but I don't think that this is part of that problem. I don't think this is exasperating the issue that we're having of homelessness.
Okay. That's great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevor. You have been so open and so generous with your time and also with all the information. We really appreciate all that you've told us tonight. Anybody else have
thank
anything?
you. I appreciate your providing me this opportunity to speak with the group and to allow me to be candid, because it's difficult sometimes. Depending on the audience, I have to present it in a different way, and I try to always present it in the way that I feel that is truthful and honest and candid about the challenges that we face, but also encompassing the successes that we've had. And I'm sorry, I am losing a little bit of steam because I do wake up really early in the morning. So the later days don't work so well for me anymore. Maybe when I was younger, but I want to make sure that everybody here in this group gets my email address and my phone number. And so I'll be sending that out. And I would encourage anyone, if you see something or an issue or a concern, I want you to email me. I want you to tell me about it. Even though we're a small part of Ballona Creek, 1.5 miles in length, I think we play an integral part in preserving your community that you have all built. You're the taxpayers. You're the ones that built your lives around that community. And I want to do everything I can to the best of my ability to ensure that we are providing a clean water resource flood risk management that is safe for you all. So if you see something, even if it's trash, let me know. We have so many miles of rivers, and there's only one of me, and so I can't be everywhere. And if you guys see something like, oh, hey, somebody dumped a couch in Bionah Creek, can you come get it? I'll send my crew out to go get it right away. You know, so if there's a problem that you see, if it's inside of the channel, not on the bike path, which we don't control, but inside of the river, let me know. We'll get it addressed. I want to just end my little spiel with saying I appreciate your patience, and that I hope by the end of tonight you understand why we are taking a little bit of a slower approach to doing things. We want to do it right. We want to do it once and not have to keep coming back. So I appreciate
Trevor,
your time. And yes.
Trevor?
One quick thing, and I don't know if you answered earlier, maybe I didn't catch it, was there's some postings along the creek that there is a cleanup on Tuesday the 10th. Is that, and it was posted by LA County, I think it is. Is that something that you guys are participating in with them jointly that you're aware of?
We are not. So I don't know any information about that. You know, I'm guessing maybe DPW moved ahead with their Overland Avenue Bridge cleanup. But if you have any information, if you can share that with me, I'll reach out to Jamel Cruz, who is my point of contact in Bionah Creek for LA County DPW, and I'll find out some information about it as well. And it could be a full cleanup. It could be, oh, well, the terrace team is coming out there, or Loss is coming out. I really don't have that information. So, but I will go get it, and I appreciate actually this entire meeting because I was able to find out a little bit more about what DPW is doing.
Thanks, Trevor. And Trevor, we're going to put your email address in the chat. I know that you can't because you're calling in. So a lot of people have written thank you to you in the chat, but you can't see it. But we're going to put your email address there and your name.
Great, perfect. Please, and include my cell phone number. My cell phone is on all the time. I work Monday through Thursday. I work 4/10, but I work a lot of Fridays too, and I'll take calls on Fridays. And if there's a problem or an issue, reach out to me, and we will do our best to get it rectified in an expeditious manner. So, especially when it comes to debris and trash, if there's something you guys see that we can help with that maybe was overlooked or had just occurred, let me know, and we'll jump on it. So, wish everybody a wonderful evening, and well, I include my email address onto your guys' communications, and I will continue to follow up with the group and let you know. Just so you know, there's one thing I don't do, and I do not publish the dates of my cleanups. And there's a reason why, because of negative media attention. So I'm very secretive. So I'm very secretive and quiet about the dates of my debris cleanups. So we continue to do what we do without having negative attention brought upon ourselves. And then, well, once something's done, I create like a storyboard, and I tell you how many, tons of trash and debris we removed, how many people received services, and I put a lot of detailed information. So I'm more than happy to share that with the group, but I do ask for your understanding on the reason why I will not tell you what day I'm going to go in. That's for my safety and my crew's safety, and for this program safety, so we can continue to operate successfully the way we have.
Thank you. And honestly, it was really great to hear you talk about it very candidly and openly with us, because we pretty much have all felt the same way, but our local government tells us otherwise. So it's been great that you gave us that confirmation. We appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good evening.